Hi everyone, and welcome to the next instalment of the Well Woman guest speaker series, which I still can't say. And I'm really excited about today's speaker, who is Sheryl Takyama. And Sheryl is a nutritionist who specialises in weight. And I know a little bit about Sheryl. I've kind of worked now and again, and we've talked, and I really love your story, and I love the honesty that you bring to it, and I love the fact that you also still see a nutritionist. You're still working on yourself, which I think is so important, that it's not like a done and dusted. So I'm really excited about having a chat with you about what you do and introducing you to everyone in the circle. So do you want to just tell people how you work in the health and wellbeing field at the moment?
Oh, thanks, Sarah. Gosh, it's funny, you saying that about the fact that I still see a nutritionist. I remember the day that I'd had that sort of breakthrough moment where I decided, you know what, I'm going to leave the corporate career. I am going to turn my absolute passion into my career and business. And I wanted to become a nutritionist. And I'd always been so passionate about nutrition from my own weight journey. But I remember when I had to tell my nutritionist, or, suggest this idea to her, I was so worried about what she would think, because she knew me. At that point, I'd seen her probably about, at least 8 years. And I felt like she knew me better than my husband. Like, she knew Sheryl, warts and all of the truth, the messy, the emotional eating, the sugar addiction, all of that stuff. And I remember saying to her, what do you think, Alison? And, she was quite a firm person. And she looked at me and she said, Sheryl, I think you'd be a fantastic nutritionist, because you know this journey, and you know the journey of the people sitting in front of you. And that really meant a lot to me, because I think in my life, this nutrition thing, the weight thing, was the one thing I struggled with. And I find that's the same with a lot of my clients. You're onto it in other areas. You've got your education, you're doing good at work, things are going well. Yeah. But there's this blimmin' thing with the eating. And I felt like it was my greatest weakness. But I suppose I've sort of turned it now into really my greatest strength.
Absolutely.
Cool. Because the weight was always the thing for me. I gained a lot of weight in my late teens. Wow. And so I'd more than 90 kilos. I'd had a bit of a struggle with emotional eating and grief. So that was when I had, when something bad happened to me, that was when I suppose I turned to food. Wow. And that whole journey started for me.
So what was that from being a teen? So I take it as a kid, you didn't have any kind of issues, and then all of a sudden you're a teenager and you're finding that food gives you comfort. So what kind of happened along the line to the point where you thought, that's it, I'm going to train as a nutritionist?
Yeah, well, I gained weight quite quickly. I went away to university. It was a combination of quite a bit of partying, I must say, living in the student hostel, quite a bit of drinking, but really the emotional side came in. Unfortunately, I'd lost my best friend. So I was sort of dealing with that, moving away from home. And I just developed this pattern of drinking and then getting upset and hitting the food. And I think I gained at least 20 kilos in a year. Wow. And it came on quite quickly. So by the time I'd finished university, I was up more than 30 kilos, and I was really unhappy. Although on the outside, I was still bubbly, always had lots of friends, but on the inside, I was so upset with my weight. And I'm a performer. I love singing, and I stopped doing any of that because I was just too embarrassed. So it was really hard to be at that point where you're young, your friends are out shopping, it's 21st, everyone's going to 21st. And I'd be like, oh my God, what am I going to wear? And just, it was a really, I didn't like being overweight, but I just couldn't seem to stick at anything to sort of do anything about it. I tried Weight Watchers and it worked for a little bit, but I couldn't break, I suppose, the emotional eating patterns and just that habit. But the real change for me happened when I moved overseas. So I went to Japan and worked as an English teacher when I was 22. And what I found as I look back, because a lot of people have said to me, oh, well, it must be because you went and moved to a country where they eat healthily. That's how you lost 30 kilos. But funnily enough, the program that I worked for, the other teachers all gained weight because as young expats, there was quite a bit of going out and socializing and eating out. But for me, I started exercising. My friends and I would go to the gym. And so I kind of started better habits, and I created a goal for myself because I was going to come home and as a surprise. So that kind of got me taking the actions. And it's funny because I didn't even have I never had a goal to lose 30 kilos. But for the first time in my life, I was putting myself first.
Right.
And that was the key. I had a bit more time. I finished work and I'd go to the gym to meet my friends. It wasn't like I hated exercise, but my friends and I would meet at the gym. So I started sort of, then created this goal for myself. So I started getting better habits without even making it hard. And of course, once I started seeing results, that really motivated me to keep going. So I'd lost 30 kilos in a year.
Wow.
And it was, look, I laugh and I think, God, it wasn't even hard. But actually, I was just so able to do it because I only had myself to sort of I could spend more time on myself. And I just was so happy, I suppose, to finally be going in the right direction. Once I got that first little bit off, I was away. And I think this is the thing with weight loss. Sometimes it's just getting started. It's just taking, changing those habits to get you over that first hump. All of a sudden, you put your pants on and they start to feel a bit looser. And I find that is really motivating in itself with clients. Once someone said to them, oh, you've lost weight, they're off. So sometimes it's just getting started. That's sometimes the hardest part. But yeah, so when I came back from Japan, what I found was I was actually gaining weight again, and I knew nothing about nutrition. And I thought, I was in my mid-20s at that point, and I thought, well, I can't understand, why am I gaining weight? I think I'm doing everything right. And someone said to me, maybe you should go and see a nutritionist. So I did, and that changed everything for me. She taught me all about low carb, which worked really well for me. And back then, that wasn't a very common way of eating, but it worked so well for me. So I kept seeing her until she moved overseas, and I still see a nutritionist now. But we don't talk about food. For me, it's this process of, it's really all about mindset, and being accountable to somebody. That's the key. It's the accountability. We talk about sleep and stress. And I've kept that 30 kilos off now for 23 years. So I'd never regained that weight. But the reason I was able to do that and lose 40 kilos of pregnancy weight, it's not because I know how to eat. That's got very little to do with it. It's having the mindset in place, and we're really doing the work up here so that I'm willing to do it.
How hard was that when you became a parent? Because I know that it's easier when you're on your own, but the minute you become a mum, for those that you put everyone else first. Your kids come first, your partner comes first, work comes first, and I see it time and time again. And I've done it myself, where we put ourselves last, and we'll do the change tomorrow, we'll work on it tomorrow, but we never do. So how does someone who's in that situation, what do they need to do?
And I tell you the other thing that I think becoming a parent, how that really messed with me, lack of control. This desire, I think, to be able to control our food, and we often have this myth that we are in control. And I know for a lot of people, this is why they succeed in other areas. They're really successful at work, but this food thing is a bit more challenging. And then you have kids, and all of a sudden, oh my goodness, I'm not getting the sleep. And I know I really struggled with that. And the lack of sleep was a big one, certainly for me. And I know I have a lot of clients who, I've got young kids. It is definitely a hard phase. And it's funny because by the time I'd had kids, I already had lost all the weight. I had the food plan. I was a seasoned pro. But yes, it was definitely a very challenging phase. And again, I think for me, the key to being able to stay on track through that challenging phase was because I still had that appointment with Alison, and I knew I was going to show up and really look at myself.
Yeah.
So I couldn't hide from myself. I couldn't hide into months and years of putting myself bottom on the list, because I knew I was going to show up. I mean, when I first had babies, I only made an appointment every 2 months because obviously life's really busy. But I knew that I had that date when I was going to show up and I was going to have to face up to it. And I'm absolutely certain that was the key thing that stopped me from falling back into that place, because it is so easy. And I'll tell you, the other thing that really reared its ugly head for me in that phase of having kids was the sugar addiction. Before then, I mean, I'd loved sugar. You don't gain 30 kilos without liking a bit of sugar. I think I liked everything actually, but particularly when I became a mum, and it was that combination: lack of control, lack of sleep, tiredness, and all of a sudden and having the food in the house, like it's all these kind of combination of factors where all of a sudden, it'd be grabbing for the goodie bags and Halloween leftovers. I always laugh and say that every time I put on a new pair of pants and stuck my hand in the pocket, there was a chocolate wrapper. So yes, I think that whole phase of becoming a parent definitely brings a lot of different things into the mix that make it a bit more challenging.
Yeah, and I remember, and I've had clients that admitted it too, where you end up eating kids' food. I mean, there's no such thing as kids' food and adult food, but you end up, because it's easy, eating kids' food, which isn't always healthy. And then that's not, and then you end up with that vicious cycle. So you're having the fish fingers and the chips and the lollies and the jellies and the ice cream and the kind of food you wouldn't eat if you.
Yes. Oh, look, absolutely. And this is the thing, it doesn't matter. I mean, I knew all about low carb by then. I had all the knowledge. I was studying to be a nutritionist. Like, I knew more than probably most people. But this is the thing, it's not about knowledge in this game. It's about action. And whatever action we take is going to lead us in the direction for the next action in that of the same vein. So this is why once sometimes we start on that path, it's so hard to pull it back, because now we're getting momentum going in the wrong direction. And it's not as easy to pull yourself back when you're not in so much control of your time, and you're trying to juggle so many things, and you're tired, and you're getting older, hormones. So this is, I often say to women, I mean, I'm 47 now, but this is the thing. I think often some of those things we were able to do in our 20s to nuke a couple of kilos, you try and do it in your 40s, and not only does it not work, and in your 30s too, maybe it doesn't work, but you just can't be bothered. Like, it's just too hard, because there is just so much else going on in life.
Yeah. So tell me, like, with the emotional eating, this isn't something that you just suddenly get rid of. Is being an emotional eater, which I know is really common in women, is it really the accountability and the conversation around that? And that's where that plays a role, rather than it being about what you're eating.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, emotional eating is just such one of my most passionate areas, because it's still me, and I still am an emotional eater. But I like to think of it in two main ways that we can really work on our emotional eating. So the first one is by getting more used to doing a bit of mindset work, so we can help process our emotions. Because the reason we're eating emotionally is because we have a feeling, and it's that moment when you're sitting in front of the cupboard saying, what do I feel like? Oh no, I don't feel like that. You're not even hungry. What you're experiencing is feelings, and we're trying to fix them or solve them with food. So we need other strategies that we can use, and it's not a perfect journey, and it doesn't happen overnight. But the one that I found really useful is journaling. So when I'm experiencing a feeling, and my initial thought is, oh, I need to eat. If I have the time in the moment, it's grabbing that journal or writing over things like, why is it that the minute I feel tired or lonely, my instant reaction is to go to food, and I write over those things. So that the writing has been a really good tool to help process emotions a bit better and not do it as frequently. But it still happens. And this is where I think my approach is always saying to my clients, look, yes, we keep doing the mindset work, because ultimately it's brilliant to keep working on our emotions, be able to identify them, choose other actions. That's great. But we're all human, and we all have hormones and, you know, those moments where whatever happens, we the panic button goes and we want to eat. So I think the other thing that I try and help women with is, okay, if you do need to emotionally eat, here's how you do it. And I actually have a whole emotional eating guide. Like if you want to emotionally eat, that's fine, but do it with these foods in this way so that the damage is minimal. And these days, I mean, obviously, as I said, I specialize in low carb keto, but there are so many yummy, easy to choose snacks, foods, you know, substitutes that actually really allow you to get, as I say, scratch the itch, you know, to meet that need. But it doesn't have to be difficult or even overly expensive. There are a lot of options just available at the supermarket. Yeah. I think that's kind of the best of both worlds. Yes, we make progress because ultimately, you know, the better we can deal with our emotions, the better. But also knowing, okay, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly.
Yeah.
You know, and I found that's a really nice balance because ultimately we are who we are, and emotional eating is not a crime. It's just unfortunately not a great action if you struggle with weight, because it really is obviously a key thing. Anytime you eat, if you're not physically hungry, is going to be like, you know, more likely that you will gain weight.
There's a payoff for that. You talked about the low carbohydrate and the keto. So like, why is that your passion?
Because it works. It works. It's yummy. You can do it forever. And it really is based on science. You know, the debate of talking about nutrition sometimes is a bit like talking about religion. Like it gets people really heated. And, you know, my whole approach is that there is no one way that's going to suit all people. That is for sure, because we're all different. You know, in the same way that none of us looks the same on the outside, we're all unique on the inside. And I know you work in that field so much as well with gut health. So whatever we're going to choose to lose weight, we have to be willing to do for life to keep it off. And that's a real thing that I firmly believe in. I do not want anyone to think this is just a short-term thing. Fad diets, obviously there's a lot of fad diets. The weight loss industry has made a lot of money out of the quick fix. Yeah. But if you're not willing to drink shakes or inject yourself or whatever the rest of your life, you're not actually fixing anything, especially emotionally, you know, and your mindset. So I believe that certainly for my metabolism, as someone who gained weight early, I know that my body reacts to carbs. I've tested that theory many times to know that it's true. You know, high carb equals higher insulin, which my body turns to fat very easily. So the low carb way of eating, it's really helped me balance my blood sugars. I mean, I've maintained my weight loss for 23 years and lost 40 kilos of bad weight. So I know it works, but it's not just that it works, it's yummy. Like it has to be yummy. If you're an emotional eater, you have to enjoy your food. There's no option B. Like I always say to my clients, I'm never going to suggest you eat something you don't like, because that's just not going to work. You know, this way of eating, it's all based on real food, which again is really important to me. Real food. Yes, there is quite a lot of, you know, there are some easy buys now. There are some snacking things. There are bread substitutes. There are, I guess you would call them more processed foods that you can choose, but that's still a choice. I mean, it's never been easier to eat this way because so many food manufacturers now are bringing out low carb products because it has gained popularity, which is great. But really, the big reason for me is that it really suits me so well, especially gut health. And I know that's your passion. Yeah. And it's funny because I alternate now between low carb, and I've just recently done in my program a carnivore challenge where we've gone pure animal based. And my gut has never felt better. So I'm just all about experimentation, trying different things and really tuning into what works for you in a way that you enjoy, that you can keep doing. Because then it never feels like a diet. When I remember in the beginning when people would say to me, well, Sheryl, you're not fat. You know, when are you going to stop this? You know, when are you going to stop this? And I'll be like, what? Eating really delicious food, maintaining my weight and feeling awesome? Hopefully never.
So what does a low, when you talk about low carb, like what does a low carb diet look like with the clients you work with?
Yes, well, what I love about low carb as opposed to keto, I know keto's become quite popular, which is really extreme low carb. And hey, it is a way of eating that does get fast results, but it's also quite restrictive, which is fine for a certain type of person. And sometimes I have clients who like to do it for a short period of time. That's fine. But low carb to me is, I mean, if we looked at a number, most of my clients, for those out there who like counting, I like to keep, around sort of under 50 or 60. Some people can get away with a little bit more, 50, 60 grams of carbs per day, as opposed to probably the 200 plus grams of carbs that most people tend to eat. And it's looking like, and again, coming back to some of those substitutes, this is why it's so easy now, because there is low carb bread. We have low carb wraps. It's such an easy way now to make swaps for food, especially the wraps. They cost exactly the same as normal wraps. A normal wrap has 35 grams of carb. A low carb wrap has 11. So you're bringing in simple swaps without even noticing. So the things that my clients have for breakfast are things like you might do some low carb cereal with protein yogurt, eggs on toast, bacon and eggs, all real yummy. The protein shake is an option, which is often quite popular in summer. Lunch, it might be something like a toasted sandwich using Jerry's low carb bread, a yummy salad with a good portion of protein, meat, eggs, fish, healthy fats, avocado, mayonnaise, pestos, nuts, cheese. And when you add those healthy fats, it keeps your body sustained. It makes you feel satisfied, and you can go much longer between meals. You don't want to be snacking all the time. Everyone who says they're snacking all the time, I just think it's a sign that they're not satiating themselves properly. Yeah. And as you'll know so well, it's not good for gut health. That's such a cause of SIBO and IBS because our body never has a break. Yeah. So that's another reason I love low carb. It's been really good for gut health. So, a lot of just really nice balanced meals of protein, veg, healthy fats, plus some fun stuff like the low carb burgers or pizzas. And yes, for the snacks, there's a bit of sugar-free chocolate in there or dark chocolate, pork crackle, maybe, corn thin crackers with peanut butter.
Do you encourage people to eat fruit and veg? Because obviously they're carbohydrate, but they're a different kind of class of carbohydrates. So how do you balance that when you're low carb?
My advice comes to two things. Actually, three really, because with fruit, unfortunately, because fruit is so high in sugar, I don't suggest it when they're in weight loss phase, because we've got two phases, weight loss and then maintenance. And there's a big difference. So in weight loss, every bit of extra carbohydrate will count, and it's just going to slow the process down. So when people love fruit, I might say, look, maybe just have half a piece occasionally if you're really wanting it and you can't live without it. But ultimately, I do encourage, apart from berries or maybe lemons, really lower sugar fruit, I tend to encourage people in the weight loss phase not to have fruit. Vegetables, on the other hand, so that's that's purely the weight loss thing, number one. But number two is really the gut health thing, where I found that I always say to people, look, if you enjoy vegetables, go for it. Eat as much as you like, because that's going to give you volume. And I'm a big fan of people having, especially if we're restricting certain things like rice or potato, we don't want to restrict too much. I want to say, look, yes, we want to restrict the really higher carb stuff, but hey, go to town on everything else. However, this is also something that I encourage people to just test their guts from, because if they're getting bloated and they're really struggling with digestion, then I suggest they cut back on vegetables a little bit, particularly, as you'll know, the higher FODMAP ones, the higher ones that ferment, cauliflower and broccoli. So for me in vegetables, it's very much an individual thing. So yeah, we sort of got the weight side of it, and then thinking of gut health, which is such an individual thing. And then it also coming down to number three, which is also making this doable. I think often people have this pressure to think that a meal has to look a certain way. Now, I'm not saying don't eat vegetables, but often if people are rushed, or if they don't have their 5 a day, they feel like they're not doing it right, or they're not, it's not good enough. And I would also sort of say, look, unless you're growing vegetables yourself. I mean, I'm not saying vegetables aren't healthy, but you know, a lot of the times if you're just buying them in the supermarket and we don't even know necessarily what's in them, how many vitamins and minerals are still in there, or particularly if someone doesn't like vegetables, I just encourage them to not feel the pressure that they have to have things looking a certain way in order to be successful. So they might have some meals. I mean, some of my simple meals might be a bit of chicken with a little bit of avo mixed in, and that's it, just a quick meal. And that's just what works in that moment. I wouldn't do every meal like that, but it's taking that pressure off and saying, look, you've got to find a way that suits you. There is no right and wrong. If you enjoy a few meals without veg, that's fine. And your system works and you've got good regularity and you feel great. That doesn't mean it's wrong if it's different from what other people do.
Yeah. So a lot of what you do is also about the language of right, wrong, good, bad, and getting rid of all of that. So it takes away the guilt and the story.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like I always say, there is a world's expert in this, you. We're the world's expert in ourselves. No one knows more than us and no one cares more than us. So we've got to really find that way that works for us at all levels, physically, mentally, emotionally, and then just go for it and have confidence to know that, well, as long as it's working for you, it's actually no one else's business.
Yeah, cool. So at the moment then, do you do one-on-ones? Do you do group programs? How are you working?
Yeah, well, I decided at the beginning it was actually before COVID, but at the beginning of 2020, my daughter was a little bit older and I'd sort of grown my business. I'd always just been a face-to-face coach and I loved being able to be at home while the kids were growing up. And I did have an office, but, you know, it was just a fantastic way to be able to work in a way where I could still be mum first. And in 2020, I remember thinking at the beginning of the year, I've been working for coaching for 10 years. And I thought, gosh, I want a way to expand my knowledge. How can I guess, grow my business and reach more people? And now that my children are a bit more independent. And then, of course, March 2020, and I went on Zoom for the first time. And that just really encouraged me to completely open up my thoughts and goals and idea of how I could hopefully reach people. So I created an online program, right? Because obviously that was a good direction. And so what I've done now is, and it's also finding that balance of still wanting to give people accountability and individual support, but have a way and a system so that I can get my knowledge and resources from all these years out to a wider audience, because not everyone has the time or the money for a one-on-one. So what I've done is I've actually created an online program called Y-Weight Academy. So within that, I've put, you know, my food plan and sample meal plans, and we do recipes every week and meal plans every week. So what I'm trying to do is, I guess, create this hub of mindset resources, food resources. So I've got someone in the South Island. I've actually got people from America. I've got a couple of people in Australia can tap in, get all of the resources. And we do group coaching with Zoom twice a month for people who still want to check in with me. So it's not the same as a one-on-one, but it is a way to get all the resources, get ongoing motivation. We've got a private Facebook group, but not have that same cost of doing a one-on-one. And it's not the same time in terms of having to drive up for an appointment or anything like that. So yeah, so I've got the group program now and that's going really well. It's just such a cool space to be in with women who all have the same goal. So the private Facebook was really great. So that's been fantastic, but I still do one-on-ones because there are still people, and I know I'm one of them. I like to show up with my nutritionist and have that one-on-one time. So I still do one-on-one coaching. And I love it. I mean, I love people. I love seeing people's journeys and watching their body composition change and trying different things. So I think I'll always do that. It's just been really great with I guess, that extra pushing of COVID and having to diversify and learn new things and push ourselves in that direction, where it's been a really good challenge. And a great opportunity to be able to now have something where I can work with more people and share the knowledge.
Giving people those options so they can then work however. So imagine that you've just met your 20-year-old self. What advice, bearing in mind the journey that you've been on and your experience and knowledge as to where you are now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self? What should she need to hear from you?
I think back to when I was 20, I was so overweight, and just not miserable, because I'm always been a happy person, but in my heart, I'd given up singing. I wasn't living my best life, put it that way. But what I would say to myself is, Sheryl, all of the challenges you're going to go through in life will turn out to be your greatest triumphs.
Wow.
But you can't have the triumph without the challenge.
Yeah.
You can't always be in joy. You've got to know the hard part to push yourself further and to really appreciate that other side. So that's what I'd say, because of course we've all had challenges. And I mean, for me, especially the sugar addiction was a terrible one. But I would say to her at 20, don't worry, girl, you're good. You'll get through it, but there's no easy path in this life thing. And it's by getting through it, that will be your greatest triumph, to move on and help others.
Yeah. Which is a really good lesson for now as well, because every challenge, it's about looking for the lesson in that and knowing that there's a reason. So you just got to find the lesson.
And boy, we've had a lot in the last 2 years, this year, and and not to be negative, but the challenges continue. And so this is it. It's not what happens to us, it's how we react.
Yeah.
And I'd read all that prior to COVID. I used to, we work in mindset, don't we, Sarah? Like, we know the books, we do the reading. Well, for me personally, I've never had to live it so much as this last year. And I feel like, that what I've learned, my own personal growth of this time has been huge and hard, but it's only going to help us moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
It's like, nice if we could learn and grow without the challenges. Thank you, universe. But we just won't. We don't.
No, that's exactly right. And I see it in our kids too. Like, I mean, I have a 16-year-old and 11-year-old, and as a mum, I want to protect them from anything painful in life. But, I have to step back and say, actually, when I think of my life, it's all that painful stuff that made me step up, put my big girl pants on and get a bit tough. And even then I'm not tough. So this is what I'm telling myself about the phase that we're going through right now. It's an inevitable part of life. And if we choose to see the lesson I just keep saying, this is one of my favorite quotes, anything that's going to happen after tomorrow, after today, is an imagination. No one knows what the future holds. So if I'm going to imagine the future, I am going to damn well imagine the future I want to see.
Yeah.
It's been so easy to, everything's negative. It's so easy to read all these pessimistic things. And I'm like, no, actually, nobody knows what's going to happen. In Sheryl's world, it's all roses out there, I tell you.
Oh, yeah. I love it. Fluffy bunnies and unicorns.
Yes. It feels a lot better to me. I mean, I've had times and I had anxiety, worrying. I'm like, well, that's not going to help me. But actually, if I just focus on the world I want to be in and just take steps every day to create that, then that's a really, really nice place to be. And when we feel positive, we're far more likely to want to eat well as well. It's all related. It's all up here.
Yep. Really true. That's awesome. So if people want to work with you, where could they go? How can they find out more?
Yeah, great. Well, they can find out more. My website is just whyweightacademy.com, and it's weight as in WEIGHT. So that's whyweightacademy.com. And there's the options there, as I said, for the membership with all the resources, or to also work with me one-on-one. And of course, I've also got the option there to book in a free phone call. If someone just wants to call and have a chat and see if we would be a good fit, they can do
that on the website too. There's a way of,
Yep, all of that's through my website.
Awesome, cool. Oh, thank you so much for giving up your time and talking to us today. It was really interesting. I really enjoyed that. So.
Oh no, look, thank you so much, and good luck for the rest of your speakers and for the rest of the week.
Thanks, Sheryl. Appreciate it.
Okay.